And welcome, Flip Clock fans. What is Flip Clock Ephemera and why should you care? Well, I didn't even know what ephemera was or what it referred to until someone told me I had a lot of it. Well, I have a lot of flip clocks, a lot. And over the years, you start collecting the paperwork that goes with it. In general, that's what you would call flip clock ephemera. But there's more to it than that. And I'm going to show you what it has done for me as far as establishing the history of flip clocks and such. Just to start, so here's a piece here. This is what I call the famous Köhler catalog. So you've got this beautiful insert that came with a lot of the Köhlers. And it's one of my favorite. I almost should frame it, but I'm not sure what side to frame. It's just got a lot of the early Köhlers. It's a beautiful catalog, and it's almost my wish list. I'm a big fan of Köhlers, and there's a lot going on here. This C661, almost impossible to find. Haven't ever really seen one available. That one's interesting because the designer of the Köhler 101, which for some reason is not pictured on here, also designed that clock. So that's a clock that I would like to see at some point. His name was Ricky Watanabe. So that's one thing. So I've got a lot of service manuals. Of course, I've got a lot of these cards that came with the clocks, the registration things and stuff like that. But I've got a lot of operation instructions, which I just think it's neat. And you see here, you can see what they used to call these things. So you see here what I call the whirligig. In this case, they call the operation indicator. So you'll see there are some mistakes in these things, and I'll show you some more as we go along. So here's the Köhler 222. Of course, the Köhler 227 is one. I've got a full collection of those. Köhler 222. Köhler's essentially Köhler's smallest flip clock. We've got the what you call the what is that? The flip clock, the 6003 RC-6003. No Country for Old Men. That's what they call it. The No Country for Old Men flip clock, because it's appeared in that movie. So I've got an original Solari Udine Cifra 3 manual. You can see here the operation. It's in Italian and English, so it tells you how to operate that. So I like that. It's kind of historical. Now here we go. We've got one for the. This is, again, what would come with the clock, the RC-7021. This is the famous Cameron, or the RC-7469. It's just how to operate it. Looks like we've got a warranty card there, too. Now, this is where it gets interesting to me. So, this is the Sony Digimatic 8FC69WA. This was what was sold in the United States. Now, Sony billed itself originally as being the ones who came out with the digital clock radio, and the reason they did was this one. This is the Sony Digital 24, and so on their website they actually put that up there as, hey, we made the first digital clock. They didn't, and they had to quit saying that. I actually have somewhere I have an service manual of a clock that predated. We'll find it later. It was a JCPenney clock, and it was digital, but it was rolling wheel, and it came out in '67. And this clock, what they call the Digital 24, came out in '68. So it was the first flip clock radio, but back then no one really made a distinction about flip clocks. They didn't even call them flip clocks. They call them digital clocks with flip display. Now, what do I like about this one? What did I learn about this one? Well, let's see. It tells you don't use thinner or benzene. And then this I thought was interesting. So here we've got these flip clock radios that many of us work on, and it says here, it is recommended to have the clock lubricated once a year. Now, who knew that? Who ever did that? Lubricated it once a year? Well, we lubricate it once every 40 years, evidently, and they're still going. So I really liked that find. This was another find that really helped to establish some information about these clocks, especially the Köhler 2 mechanisms. So they're going on here on and on about, again, they call the whirligig, the operation indicator here. They go on and on about this clock, how it operates and how awesome it is. Oh, look, no hands. Isn't that neat? So, but here they talk about the motor. It's a noise-free because it's operated by a self-starting precision motor combined with a box of gears. The motor has 18 poles for longer service life and silent operation. Well, what does that tell us, 18 poles? Well, there's a formula to determine how fast a synchronous motor rotates, and that is 60 times the frequency divided by the number of pole pairs. So 60 times, in the United States, 60 would be 3,600 or 3,600 divided by 9 will put you at 400 revolutions per minute. So that's how fast our motors spin. Now, if you're in Europe, if you have a 50 hertz, you're going to have a clock that's going to spin, if you do the calculations, at 333 1/3 revolutions a minute. That's the motor. The little operation indicator will be spinning that fast. So that was interesting because I didn't know how many poles it had or anything like that. So we've got numerous. Here's a use and care guide. Again, another service manual or operation manual. So we got a lot of service manuals. So these are the things that the people who are really into electronics want because they have the schematics. Oh, it does a breakdown of the clock. There's the electronic schematics. Just interesting. So that we've got service manuals for this clock, which was that was a clock in one of the X-Men movies. I have this clock, which to me looks like a Flip Clock boombox. Other service manuals. Here's not really a flip clock, but it's a Zenith, and this is the service manual for the Ghostbusters flip clock. So I got those because I had the clocks and I thought it was interesting. So there's the manuals. Now, what else do we have? Well, we're getting into some different ephemera. When you're talking about Plato clocks, and people see these, they're not quite sure how old they are, where they came from. There's a lot of assumptions. People will tell you, oh, these were from the 1900s, early 1900s. They're not. What you have is you have the Plato clock, which did come out and was developed in 1904 and marketed at, up to 1912. And this guy here in the 1960s, his name's Charles Terwillinger Jr. He made these reproductions. He got these reproductions made from by a German company, and they were put out in the 60s, and then they kind of stopped. He was the exclusive distributor of these clocks, and there's the original Plato and his little history of it and what's going on with it, why he decided to remake it. So you'll see these out there, and that's what this is from. Now, I got this from the company that he used to own, so I contacted the company that he used to own, and he had some of this stuff laying around, and he sold it to me. So these are the original Platos made by Eugene L. Fitch. And then he talks about his reproduction of that actual Plato. So I've got that clock. I've got an original Plato, and I've got his reproduction. I really like his reproduction because that took me years to find a good one. Usually the bell or the bottom, it's not really the bell, but it's the bottom is cracked. I got one that is not cracked, and I was very happy to get that. I really like this guy, Charles Terwilliger. I did a video on him, a real detailed video on his history and how he was involved in getting Plato clocks. Now, speaking of that, he wrote the book. He essentially wrote the book on the Plato clock. So a lot of people will reference the Plato clock. He wrote the book. So this is the bulletin back in 1964. Now, it took me a while to find these, but once I found one, I got more than one. Do I need more than one? No, but if I ever wanted to really get into one and copy it or something, we would use that. I kept going until I got me a really pristine one. So this wrote the history. It's real in depth. It talks about Eugene L. Fitch, what he used to do, his inventions involving typewriters and other things. So it is the thing about the Plato clock. And it now the funny thing is, the National Watch and Clock Association, Clock Collectors Association, They're not real big fans of flip clocks, and I get the feeling they'd like to collect all these and get rid of them. Like, they can't believe they actually published something that on what they would consider a novelty clock. So there is, and you'd think I might be kidding you, but there is an attitude like that. Those clocks they don't like to consider clocks. They're just novelties. Well, they're not. They were out from the late 60s until the early 80s. Now, what is this? Well, this is an insert that appeared, or that came along with, originally, the Horolovar Plato clock. That is the reproduction that was made in the late 60s. This is a reprint of the actual article. Now, the cool thing is in the back, he's got some supplemental information, which really adds to it. So you see here, he talks about some history of the company, which he ended up contracting with to make the reproductions that came over to America. I actually have this clock and this clock. Again, I'm really into the historical clocks. There's other information about clocks, so later information. So this is rare. This is really rare. It's hard to find this, and it's hard to find this. Am I bragging? No, I'm not bragging. I'm just showing. Okay, so now what else? The one thing that took me forever to find, and is this right here. So again, we're talking about the attitude. Why wouldn't the National Watch and Clock Association be proud of that? Well, they're not into flip clocks. Well, here we have the esteemed Horological Journal. This took me years to find. I mean years to find this and get the actual copy in my hand. And then I was able to get a better copy. Of course, someone's written on it, but this was the first one I was able to find. Now, why? Because I had heard there was a flip clock in there. The first, last, and only time the Horological Journal wrote an article. I think the guy who wrote it must have been banished after he wrote it. So, because I'd heard there was a Copal flip clock mentioned in there. Now, well, not only was it mentioned, it was a big history. So we've got what they call the Copal Caslon, and it goes into great detail. I actually liked this image so much. It is the what you might call a Copal 1 motor, the original configuration. So this was changed later, but I like that so much that I actually this actual thing. I made a copy of it, and I got it to where I could put it on a coffee mug or a T-shirt or something like that. Because this, and I do have this. So as soon as I got this, I was able to get a clock that had the motor like this, a Copal 101. So I do have that. So it goes into detail. Now, there's some misinformation. He assumed that the first clock was the Plato clock, and a lot of people did, and so did I for many years. But it is actually a clock made by Josef Pallweber, and that was the first flip clock in the world, way back in before 1900, just late, like 1894. He made the first flip clock. So this was hard to find. I did a whole video about it once I found it because I was so thrilled that I found it. I mean, the guy actually charged the first one I got, I think it was like $9. I'd have paid $50 for it because I wanted to find out what was going on. But I got it for $9. Now, other ephemera like that would be this one. So I had done Google searches and I kept seeing that a clock was mentioned. Here we are in 1967. A Copal clock was mentioned that early. And this kept showing up. Almost impossible to find. So you can check me on that. These are nearly impossible to find. The bulletins of that October 64 are very hard to find. This took me forever as well. I just knew that it was mentioned, but I didn't know what it was. So when I go here and find it, I found out that what it was an actual advertisement. So you know that they had started advertising it in 1967. Oh, and they go on and on about it, of course. Scared teachers to death. People were going to quit learning how to read clocks properly. But it says, it even glows in the dark like a princess phone. Well, most people don't even know what a princess phone was. It was a big deal back in the late 60s. It was basically for girls. It was a clock that would actually glow, and it could be many different colors. So I just liked that. I liked the art style. So I had to get that. So that's when I started realizing I've got a lot of stuff like that. So now this is neat. A lot of people will get these old magazines from the 60s, 70s, and even before, And they start cutting out all kinds of advertisements and selling them, and people will buy them. I'm one of the knuckleheads that have done that. I've bought them. But I got this March 1973. It did have an advertisement of a flip clock in there. The RC-6403. I thought that advertisement was funny. Panasonic. Did you ever wake up in the morning and not know what day it was? I think that was a thing in the 70s. That was very common. We think we invented drug abuse in the 2000s. I got news for you. We did not. What else? Oh, we've got this. This is an ancient catalog. And you can see all the old style clocks they have. And right smack in the middle, there's that old original Plato clock. So I had to get this. I was doing videos on the Plato clocks and stuff. And another advertisement. And it gives you a feel for what was being sold at the same time. What did they talk about them? How did they feel about them? So that's a lot of what I've got. I showed you a good number of it, of what I have. Oh, here's another thing. I actually put that with my display. It's just another brochure about the Plato clock. So that's Flip Clock Ephemera. It does help establish history. It taught us a little bit about the molder, and I didn't even know I collected it until someone told me I did. So I have stacks of it, and it's helped me understand a little bit better about the history of flip clocks. Well, I hope this was interesting to somebody out there, maybe one person. Thanks for coming and checking us out. We hope to see you soon. Thanks for taking the time.